All right, good evening, everyone. This is the time and place set for the regular November Planning Commission meeting for 2024. I will call the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask the commissioners and staff to introduce themselves. I'm going to start on this side with the mayor and go this way.
Hi, good evening. Mike Fournier, Mayor.
Jim Ellison, former mayor.
Woody Gantina, just myself.
Josh Markham, City Attorney's Office.
Charlotte Douglas.
Tim Twing, Director of Community Development.
Charlotte Douglas, City Commissioner.
Clyde Esbury.
Brian Cooper.
And I'm Gary Casada, the chairperson. I just wanted to welcome Brian Cooper here. He is a new member. I just found out today. Welcome. And that's why I started down there, not to put pressure on you. But okay. So first item of business here is the approval of the meeting minutes for the October meeting. And I would ask if the commissioners had a chance to look these over. Do they have any changes, questions, edits, or a motion to approve?
Ms. Casada, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Motion to approve minutes as presented, second by Mr. Gantina. Is there further discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, I'm going to call for the voice vote. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. The meeting minutes for October are approved, the October 8th meeting. All right. Before we go to the public comment here, I just want to ask, did any of the commissioners or staff or council have anything they want to add to the agenda before we take the next step here? Mr. Esbury.
Ms. Casada, at the end of the meeting, I imagine would be item 5A- or 5B if we want to go before or after the non-action items. There are a couple ordinance issues that I do want to discuss, sir.
All right, ordinance issues to be discussed at the end of the meeting. All right, next issue is public comment on non-agenda items. So these are, public is welcome to come up and speak on something that is not on the agenda. And if there's anybody in the audience who'd like to do that at this time, I'd like to ask you to come up, introduce yourself, and we give you 3 minutes to give your presentation. Is there anybody who'd like to speak on a non-agenda item? All the way back there. Come on up.
A recent article in Crane's Business quoted the report by Land Use USA, a hired consultant of our master planners. It stated the residential market analysis shows that Royal Oak could gain just more than,
Start over, if you want.
Yes. A recent article in Crane's Business quoted the report by Land Use USA, a hired consultant of our master planners. It stated the residential market analysis shows that Royal Oak could gain just more than 2,800 new renter households in 2025. Further, half of the 2,800 new residents expected next year will be on the hunt for a rental living situation of less than $900 per month, and another 30% will be seeking in the range of $900 to $1,400 monthly. In other words, 80% of the demand. Not mentioned, one of the 825 rental units constructed and available in Royal Oak between 2016 and 2022, not one met those rental rates. 2, all figures are not adjusted for current vacancies, competing developments in the pipeline, and most importantly, out-migration. Factoring in out-migration, we only gain 155 households a year, not 2,800. This includes new homes, and that's until 2050. This includes new homes and condominiums, not just rentals. A lot of people are moving out of Royal Oak, and the number 1 location is Madison Heights, where housing is more affordable. 4, per SEMCOG in 2023, we had a 6.6% vacancy rate with hundreds of more approved units not yet on the market. Given the overwhelming need for affordable housing, given attainable housing is included in our community benefits brochure, along with units whose features and services meet the needs of older residents, And given we have an aging infrastructure, my questions are, why do we continue to grant variances for multiple-story, multifamily dwellings to allow construction of more and more non-affordable and attainable housing to the detriment of the neighbors? Why are we ignoring the needs of older residents in granting these projects? And why aren't we encouraging developers to align with our goals by denying these requests for variances? How much time do I have left? Oh, okay, regarding our aging infrastructure, using the population of 86,000 in 1970 to justify higher density is a non sequitur when we realized 29,000 of them were children. Although homes have become more energy efficient, there were 3,200 fewer housing units, many of which have been replaced with McMansions. It was not common to have central air, dishwashers, computers, multiple TVs, more computers, and smart devices and EVs, all of which require more energy. We didn't have a huge OCC campus, the Henry Ford Building, Baker College, a huge hotel, a mega Kroger, a Beaumont Corwell campus that has expanded 5 parking structures, a huge police station, courthouse, and city hall, to name a few. These impacts on our infrastructure since 1970 are what should be considered when deciding to increase density in Royal Oak. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak on a non-agenda item? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment section of the meeting, and we'll go to new business, and I'll turn to Mr. Twain to give us a preview of Planned Unit Development and Preliminary Site Plan SB 24-11-13.
I'm sorry.
Oh, did you want to speak?
I thought there was a public comment on the Beyond TV.
Yes, that's an agenda item.
That's an agenda.
Yes.
Okay, just to clarify. Thank
Yes. Mr. Twain.
Certainly. You do have a request in front of you tonight. The request is to rezone the property at 723 North Main Street from neighborhood business to planned unit development, or PUD. The site is on the southwest corner of North Main and Austin. The petitioner is proposing to demolish the existing hair salon structure and construct a new 4-story multifamily building with 24 units in total on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th levels. The 4th level would have 4 penthouse units with an amenity space and the balconies. There'd also be an amenity space and parking on the ground floor of the building. There are no minimum number of dwelling units or maximum dwelling unit density requirements in neighborhood business. And the density that could be occurred under the planned unit development is determined as part of your review and your recommendation on rezoning to the City Commission. The maximum height of the building that's allowed in neighborhood business is 36 feet to the roof line. The petitioner is proposing a height of 48 feet to that roof line, and so you would have to consider recommending a waiver of the extra 12 feet as part of the planned unit development. There are no setback requirements on this property since it's not adjacent to a residential zoning district. So the setbacks that are indicated are shown in the report as well as on the site plan. If you have questions on those, I can point them out, but they vary based on the shape of the lot and the position of the building. An additional item you'll have to consider is that the building is close to the property line, and therefore at the driveways, the 2 driveways, one off to Austin and one off to North Main Street, the building does not meet the 10-foot clearance triangle for leaving and exiting. That's also true of the corner of the building at Austin and Main Street. For the 24 dwelling units, the zoning ordinance requires 2 spots per unit. The petitioner is proposing 1.2 or 29 parking spaces on the lot, like as I said, underneath the building. And therefore, again, you'd have to consider waiving or recommending waiving the number of spaces that they're short. The petitioner is also proposing that eliminating some of the existing parking spaces on North Main in front of the project and converting it to a drop-off loading area for the building. This is not an item that'll be addressed under the zoning or the PUD. It's a separate item. They would have to get an agreement from the City Commission at going forth when it gets to the City Commission. In terms of landscaping, the site is somewhat short of the 10% requirement, or 1,500 square feet. They are proposing a little over 1,100 square feet of landscaping, or 7.45% of the site. So again, that's an item that the Planning Commission would have to consider as part of your review. The petitioner has submitted a letter summary of the community benefits guidelines, and those are attached to the report, and I'll let them walk through the proposal. The last item I will point out is that Planning Commission can consider whether this should be a preliminary site plan review or a final if you determine all of the items are addressed to your satisfaction as part of your recommendation. So when you get to that point, we can discuss whether it's a preliminary or a final. I'll stop with that overview.
All right, are there questions for Mr. Twing? I just have a quick question. Can you, there's, if I understand correctly, there are, on page 6, there's 5 variances to the zoning ordinance that we would have to grant if this was to go forward. The second one, I just want a little bit of clarification on the second one about the frontage.
Well, technically, in the neighborhood business zoning district, you can have residential above permitted use in that district, with the exception of off-street parking. Since predominantly the ground floor is off-street parking, it's not a permitted activity on the ground floor without your waiver or recommendation for that waiver, because it is a particular use that the zoning ordinance prohibits on the ground floor.
Okay, understood. If it was a store, and then the units were above, there need no variance, but because the parking, they do need a
Correct.
variance.
Right.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Twing? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to call the petitioner forward. I'm going to ask you to come forward with your team, introduce yourself, and tell us why you're entitled to the relief you're seeking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commission members. I am Dennis Cowan, representing the applicant. And with me this evening are Ralph and Mike Bianchi, who are the owners of the salon currently on site, and also will be the owners of the apartment building that is being proposed. Also with us is our architect of record, who will speak in a minute, Jason Krieger of Royal Oak-based Krieger-Klatt. Let me begin by saying this is a good news story for the city of Royal Oak. We have a business that has outgrown and thrived at its current location and has deemed it necessary to move Bianchi Salon to the new Jonah building on the northeast corner of 11 Mile in Maine. That is good because customers who live in and around Royal Oak will not be inconvenienced because the location is just several blocks away. Employees who live in Royal Oak will be able to continue their employment without disruption. And also they are expanding. They're adding at that location the number of chairs, so to speak, and their square footage. So we see this as a win-win for Royal Oak, and certainly a community benefit to have a business that has grown up at this location and thriving seek to move within this community, keep those jobs, keep that revenue here, and then redevelop the current site. So I might also add that the Bianchis have another business in Royal Oak. It's called Elevate. It's at the corner basically of Crooks and Normandy on the a little bit away from Royal Oak High School. Elevate is a cosmetology school which trains persons in all aspects of hair and cosmetology, and that is a franchise with L'Oreal that they have, which is put hundreds of men and women through the cosmetology school to work not only at their salons, but other salons in the greater Metro Detroit area. So they are committed to Royal Oak and want to continue that commitment and that investment with this project. So it is a 24-unit, 4-story project, which we consider to be modest compared to some other much more taller nearby apartment buildings. I might add that right across this, a little bit just north across the street at 808 North Main, there is a 24-unit, 4-story apartment building that has been there since 1940, according to the city records that I reviewed. And that has existed there without creating any difficulty in that neighborhood. And I might add one big difference between that site and our site is that site has no parking associated with it. So we did have a neighborhood meeting. We sent out 70 invites to both our commercial and residential neighbors, and we had about 20 people show up at the Royal Oak Public Library last Thursday. I believe we had a very good dialogue. Certainly there were those who were not in favor of the project, but also there were those who thanked us for having the meeting. We did hear some issues connected to the construction at the current, at the location just north of our proposed development, and we took that to heart and certainly do not want to have some of the impositions that have been made on the residential community by that construction, and have assured the residents that we will find a location for the construction workers to park, which we have nearby, as well as not block Austin unless absolutely necessary with as has been done in the past with the current construction that's going on to the north. I'll have Jason is going to cover, I think, a couple of the issues that were brought up by our neighbors will be addressed in the course of Jason's presentation. But one thing that I want to put on the record, because I said I would do it, is residents were concerned that our tenants and or the Bianchis would ask for parking permits on the residential streets. I don't think that's allowed under the ordinance, but irrespective of that, we are more than willing to put in writing in the PUD agreement that we will not ask for such parking permits. We don't have a need for those to be parking on the residential street. Austin is right directly adjacent. Willis and Crane are nearby, so I want to put everyone's concern to rest with respect to that issue. And as I said, Jason will cover some items that were also brought up, I think, and the resolutions we have for those. We believe we have presented you with a significant list of community benefits, including 6 EV chargers. We also have an elevator in the building, which will not only be an issue of convenience, but also help those with mobility challenges. And as you know, not all apartment buildings have elevators. So there are other community benefits that we have listed, I have listed in the letter and that I sent to you, and we'll be glad to discuss those in more detail. So at this time, I'm going to ask Jason to come up and walk you through the site plan and the building, and I think some of the excellent features that we have, not only for the community as a whole and the plus it will be, but also for the tenants. I do want to mention one issue that did come up. I think there was agreement at the neighborhood meeting that will actually improve the traffic and parking situation in the area with this change. Bianchi Salon, as I said, has thrived at this location, and on very busy days, they have upwards of 200 customers and employees who come through that building. So that is traffic, a lot of it is on Main Street. But I think this will improve the situation by having a much more serene apartment complex built on this location instead of a busy and active, very busy and active business. So, Jason?
Good evening. My name is Jason Krieger with Krieger-Klett Architects, 400 East Lincoln, Royal Oak, Suite A. And we prepared a brief presentation for everybody here to run through the building. Tim already did a great job giving you the overview, but I figure we'll walk through the building. I'll touch on a few items that maybe we haven't addressed yet, and then I just handed out a packet to you guys with some supplemental information. These are some items that came up, as Dennis mentioned, after the neighborhood meeting. So these are items that we thought about afterwards, and it was after all of this was submitted. We prepared some other documentation to talk about sight lines as far as from the parking lot leaving beneath the building, as well as a screening of the folks who live on floors 2, 3, and 4 to the neighbors to the west. So we'll just run through this. So this is the location. I think everybody knows where it is, corner of Austin and Main Street. Next slide. We have some existing photos. One thing to point out really quick is our ground floor building, or the ground floor portion of this building is almost the exact same size as Bianchi Salon. I think it's just a little bit bigger, but it's funny how similar it is. There we go. Existing, keep going, Tim. Thank you. Okay, so we can stop here. So this is the site plan. As I mentioned, the ground floor of this building sits, it would be in the northeast corner of the site. And you would circulate around behind the building. You could come in or out off of Austin or Main Street. It's primarily parking on the ground floor. We have a refuse room on the ground floor which faces Austin. That's fully enclosed. So the doors would come up and the trash folks would take that out at the day or the moment when they take out the trash. Otherwise, it's totally enclosed. There's a trash chute in the building. The other items that we have on the ground floor, which I'll show you in the next slide, would be mail, some small amenity space, and utilities. So you can see right there. And one thing I'm going to point out, which is in the packet that we'll walk through in a second, is that we did carve the ground floor of the building back. And I think we're off by the vision triangle by a foot, which we can adjust if the Planning Commission chooses to. The one thing that is in that vision triangle is a column, and you'll see that in a rendering in the packet. The yellow areas are really services, stairwells, elevators, water riser rooms, things of that nature. The darker shaded area that's kind of on the right side of the site, that's the building above. So on the ground floor, all the way on the west, there's like daylight. You could see up to the sky. Just to the west of us is the commercial property ordinance. I forgot what that place is called, but I think weapons shop. Ordinance. Yeah, okay, yep. So let's go to the next slide. So this is floor 2 and 3. It's a double loaded corridor. The green boxes represent 1-bedroom units. And then the corners, the purple, are 2-bedroom units. And then we have the central corridor with the elevator and stairs at the top and then stairs on the bottom. One thing to point out, which is beneficial, I think, to the project and also the neighbors to the west, is that all of the balconies are recessed. So they're not sticking out like what you see on Icon or Billings Place. So it makes any kind of views out to the neighbors much more difficult. In other words, they're more screened. Next slide, please. This is the top floor. So we have 4 penthouse units. Really, it's just larger 2-bedroom units. We have upstairs amenity space. It's not fully programmed yet, but you can see that their balconies are recessed. They're larger. And then we have a rooftop deck for the amenity space. It's on the northeast side of the building, just for folks to enjoy. Next slide, please. So the next couple slides are the elevations. It's pretty much an all brick building, which is great. The Bianchi said they want something that's going to be pretty much maintenance free because they're long-term holders of their properties. So it's going to be brick. The beige that you see in there would be like a faux wood material. And then the very top floor, just at the penthouse, it's going to be a mixture of pre-finished brake metal and then those James Hardy panels. Next slide, please. We have some renderings I can show that better. So here's some images from the street. So on the ground floor on the right, that's all the amenity space. You can see the spot where you drive in on the left. And then on the very upper right portion, that's the outdoor amenity space for the tenants. And then all on the top, those are all balconies for the penthouse units. And then here's just some aerial shots showing it sit on the site. Okay, you pop these in. Okay, so let's go back. So these are in this packet, but let's go back to this packet right here really quick. So the yellow triangles that we're showing are the 10 by 10 vision triangles. So if I start on the left, the northwest, I should say, along Austin, that seems like it meets the vision triangle on the left, but on the right is where we would actually be impeding on that vision triangle. And we've done that on other projects like Billings Place, and we can name a few. And what we would do there is you could provide like a vision mirror or something like that so folks could see anybody who's heading due west on the sidewalk. So we've been through that before and we've solved it. If I go over to the corner of Austin and Main Street, and we have a rendering here that you could see, but it's open. The only thing that you're gonna see is a column. So we think that that actually meets the intent of the vision triangle. And if you go south along Main Street, the same thing. As you're driving towards the west in a vehicle, to the left and right, those are all windows. So you can see people who are coming down the street. So there is a bit of wall, and you'll see in the renderings here, but you still see people coming down the street. So the next page is what Tim just had up there. And that yellow line is going from a car looking out. And what we're showing there is that we're actually improving that condition compared to how it exists today. So in other words, you have more safety. Next slide, please. Or is that it for those? Okay. So then we have a photo of the current conditions of today compared to a rendering in basically the same spot. So you can see that it's more open. And then going back to your packet, that's where we have some views from the parking lot looking out. So we're showing going north out to Austin, going east out to Main Street, and then we have some renderings. So you could see the actual photo of what's there this morning. I went out there compared to a rendering, so you could see that you can see people walking by. And then the same thing heading north out to Austin. You have that comparison for you guys. And then finally, we're going to address the balconies. So we put the upper floor plan over top of the aerial, and then so it gives you a sense of where the residences are compared to this building. So if you go straight due west, you have the commercial property, an alleyway, and then an empty lot. Currently, it's an empty lot. If you go straight north, that's where the condos are being built, and there's some homes to the west of that. And then if you go southwest, that's where the single-family residents are currently at. So our proposal, after meeting with the residents, would be to, and I highlighted it in yellow, would be to build an actual half wall there. We had an open railing before. So the half wall would be about 4 feet tall. And then you're set back about 8 feet into the unit. So, I mean, you're pretty well tucked in there. So we're discouraging folks from looking over onto the neighbors. And that's my presentation.
Are there questions for the architect?
Yeah, just one quick question. When I'm looking at the proposed layout of the building, is there any reason you didn't center it on Main Street between the two side streets so the visibility triangle issue just goes away? As opposed to building it right to the corner of Austin and Main.
Oh, I mean, take it, literally slide it to the west?
Literally slides to the south. So it's literally halfway between Austin and Crane, I believe, is the street to the south.
Yeah.
And then you've got, whatever X amount of feet on both the north and south side of the building.
So right now, if you really, it starts with the upper floors and getting the number of units that we were looking to get. And then we start to line up our vertical circulation, elevators and stairs. And so when the elevator and stairwell was on the end, which is the safest way for an apartment building, right, to be on the extreme ends for egress, You take that down, that's where it started to put the amenity space there. Also, we had to park the site as best we could, right? So the parking it worked the best, it was most efficient, hugging the south and the west. The building also slid further towards Main Street for two reasons. One, to keep it as far away from the residents as possible. Two, for fire ratings. So you want to stay at least 10 to 15 feet off the property line. And I can't remember what the dimension was, but that's why it pushed towards Main. So those are some of the things that went into the layout.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
So the sightline study you did on pulling out into Main Street, you're showing you've got windows along Main Street, but you've got parking spots directly
Yep, that's
against
correct.
that glass?
That's correct, yeah.
So when cars or someone's got an SUV or something parked there,
Yep, that's
you've
correct.
lost that line of sight?
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, you'd have to be able to see kind of through between whatever, but yeah, that's exactly correct, yeah.
The one sight line that still concerns me, and you spoke of it, and I'm still not happy about it, is the northbound out of the parking lot onto Austin. Sure. I mean, you can see cars and people coming from the left, but you can't see anybody coming from the right. Do you have any, I'll be asking for some sort of warning bell, alarm, et cetera.
Absolutely, yeah, that's exactly what we did, and maybe you remember Billings Place, we did that. I mean, they have that at Main North Lofts, they have that at Sky Lofts. We would absolutely implement some safety features there.
Well,
Yes.
and you mentioned Billings Place because we had, I don't know, City Commission or this Planning Commission at some point in the past couple years had people who had near misses at Billings Place because the warning systems hadn't been installed, weren't working. So
okay.
I think it's vital there that we make
Absolutely.
sure that we've got an alarm system for people coming from the
Absolutely,
east. Okay, thank you.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, I've got a whole host of questions here. Primarily, it's centered on the what's been listed as far as the community benefits of the project. The first question is related to the note here about 5% increase in insulation value across the building. What is the building construction type? How are you achieving this? And have you done an energy model to help validate your increase in insulation?
So going backwards, no energy model has been done yet. The construction type, it's a steel podium for the ground floor, and then it's wood framing up above. And that's a goal that we're going to go for, and it would have to be done with insulation and other means, basically.
Okay. On the chargers, I'm assuming those are all level 2 chargers. Are those going to be exclusively for resident use, or are they available for the public to use? If
I believe they're all resident use, some local ownership. Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Okay. Let's see, what else? The elevator that you mentioned, the fact that it's in the building, I think, is a great thing. So that's not required by code, just based on the 4-story building? Is that
It is
correct?
required by code.
It is required by code?
Yep.
Okay. So it would be there regardless?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. The water efficient appliances, you mentioned here just low flow plumbing fixtures. Can you expand on that a little bit in terms of, are you using only water sense rated fixtures? What criteria are you using for that low flow designation that you're?
Honestly, I think it's just right now, the goal is energy efficiency. We haven't picked any of that stuff out yet.
Okay, it was listed here, so I'm asking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I get it, yeah.
Again, the stormwater detention, I believe that's a requirement, so not necessarily beyond what the minimum standards are.
That's correct.
You mentioned a wood frame building as a benefit. Can you just describe a little bit why that's a benefit?
We just view it as a renewable resource. Kind of like in the past, we've also been recommended in just other jurisdictions to try and use more brick, for example, because it could become a recycled material, things of that nature. So that's where I think that came from.
Bicycle facilities. You mentioned bike racks. I didn't see it on the plan necessarily. If you can maybe speak
Yeah.
to it a little bit where it's located.
We were looking to locate them in the southwest corner, but it never made it on this set of drawings. So
But it is planned for the project.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, they're going to have to put bike racks in. Their tenants are going to demand it, but we want to,
Is
yeah.
it bike racks or bike lockers?
Bike racks.
Bike racks,
Yeah.
okay. And then if you could expand a little bit on the statement about using Royal Oak Business as residence for design, development, and construction. I think you've sort of talked to, of course, your firm, the owners, if there's anything else in addition to that you want to speak to.
I'm sorry, say that, using,
So it's a use of Royal Oak businesses and residents for design, development, and construction. If you want to, maybe want to
Well,
cover that in more detail.
I talk about buildings, he talks about.
Yeah. Yeah, sir, yeah. That is listed as a community benefit. Obviously, already the team that's in place is Royal Oak based, and it is the intent, we're a little bit a ways from determining all the vendors, but they want to use as many Royal Oak businesses as they can, such as they use at Bianchi Salon. So that would be the goal. But again, we're pretty far away removed from even having until we get approval into determining the exact people who will be working on the project. But it makes most sense because they have to travel less, and hopefully crews will be available to work on the project.
Last two questions with respect to green space. The percentage that's been calculated, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the drawings correctly. Essentially, everything on the drawings that's green on the landscape plan is part of that calculation. Is that correct?
Yes.
I noticed was part of an area was specified as a gravel area, but everything that's green is all part of that calculation. Correct. Okay. And then the last question is on the refuse room. I understand that there's a trash chute for the building. Is it large enough, and is it designed in a way to accommodate recycling for all the residents within that refuse room?
Recycling is typically taken down separate. That would just be for the trash chute. But it would be a 30-inch diameter, so it's large enough to handle like larger things. But usually in one of the upper storage rooms, there'll be recycling bins that ownership would take out.
Okay, so there is a provision for recycling,
Oh, yeah.
just not necessarily in that.
Yes, absolutely.
In the refuse room. Okay. All right, that's all I got for now.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
I got a couple questions. Don't go away. I just want to clarify, because I want to follow up on what Commissioner Esprey was asking about there. If I'm looking at these, what you gave us here, does the building go all the way down to the southern border of the property line? There's a triangle piece there, but the building goes to the property line on the south end, does it not?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Second thing, I want to know, if I am counting this correctly, everything in the site, in the floor plan that's blue is 2 bedrooms, and the ones that are green are 1 bedroom?
No, the ones that are green, the ones that are green in the middle, those are 1 beds. And then on the corners, those are 2 beds.
Okay, and the second and third floor are the same?
Yep, that's correct. Second and third are the same. Fourth are the penthouse units.
Okay, so I'm counting 8 2-bedroom units on the second and third floor, 4 on the fourth floor, 6 1-bedroom on the second floor, and 6 1-bedroom on the third floor, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, if I count right, that's 36 bedrooms. I just want to make sure I'm clear for the record. There are 36 bedrooms on this site.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. All right, any other questions for the petitioner? At the moment, none.
Okay.
There'll probably be more. Have a seat, and I think we're ready to open the public comment on this item. Anything from staff before we start?
No.
Okay. All right, we're going to have public comment on this agenda item. If you would like to speak on this item, please come forward, introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Francis Shore. My wife and I have lived at 703 Washington Place Drive in Royal Oak for nearly 30 years. In those 30 years, we have seen many changes in the cityscape, some good, some bad. Among the latter was the loss of the Royal Oak Main Theater, a cultural gem. It seems to many of us that the primary directive of the Planning Commission is growth for growth's sake, which is also applicable to the trajectory of cancer. In this instance, we have another request for a large condo complex directly across the street from the one that is still being built. It will invariably add to the congestion and the pollution plaguing the city. I think it's time for the Planning Commission and the City of Royal Oak to call a halt to such development. Instead, how about thinking of something very different? Why not have the space repurposed for a cooperative daycare center that will be helpful to all the young families moving into Royal Oak who could use affordable neighborhood daycare? In the process of repurposing that space for a daycare facility run by the city and volunteer parents, the city should also consider getting rid of the dangerous ammunition space known as Midwest Ordnance. It shouldn't even be allowed to remain in existence, especially with the middle school so close by. So my plea is for some sanity and alternative thinking in your deliberations, helping you see your way through this forest of growth into the light of a new and better space for us all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Right there. Please introduce yourself. 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Alex Morford. I'm a 6-year homeowner of a single-family home in Royal Oak, and I'm also a member of YIMBY Oakland County. I'd like to voice my support for this project. Right now, there's no housing on this lot, and this adds housing units to the city. Adding units reduces overall pricing in the city. I would love to see affordable units, but even at market rate, what's before you today is an overall positive for the city's housing supply and should be recommended for approval. I think we all remember 3 to 4 years ago when new car supply was constricted and the price of used cars went up drastically. That's because people who normally shop for new cars at that time were sent to buy, were buying the nicest used cars they could find and the entire prices rose. I think this property will be similar to that. There's folks in Royal Oak right now who can afford new market rate rentals, but because there's so many of them, they're actually going and renting things that are below their budget. If we open up these new developments for those people, some of the other developments open up for other people. So I think that's important to keep in mind. We really need to keep supply increasing so that prices don't increase. Additionally, I walk by this frequently, and it's a great location on a bus line near a grocery store in downtown. I think we should trust the developer on what they've proposed for parking. Due to parking requirements, they could never build multifamily on this lot without the PUD. Hopefully the new master plan makes some changes so something like this would be administratively approved. I've come to other meetings and said similar comments. I think this is really a good proposal for the city and reasonable scale for the area. One other comment I want to make, a lot of people comment about environmental and how things may or may not impact that. When we think about 24 units on a nice lot like this, it's already a paved lot. We're not adding environmental impact by putting people here, but if you imagine 24 families that move to a new single family development in a far suburb, because there's not enough housing in Royal Oak, that's going to have a lot more environmental damage, right? You could have to destroy 12 acres of forest to house 24 families if you don't build enough dense housing in more urban areas. So overall, I think this is a good project, and I'd love to see this recommended for approval. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else would like to speak on right there? Oh, you know what? You're closer, so come on up because she ceded the mic to you.
Okay, my name is Leslie Ballion. I'm a manager at Royal Oak Dental. I'd like to say a few things. I do know the Bianchis, and I know Michael Bianchi. They are he is a very, very nice and friendly person. I know that he's sociable, and I know that he's also gotten to know members of this council. However, I do want to bring up a few points. It's a beautiful building. It's the wrong location. You know what? We have a middle school right there. I watch those middle schoolers walk every day to and from work. And we were talking about that we have sightline problems. This is a danger to our community. Not only that, this council has done nothing about the parking problem. The Bianchis are moving, not only to make money, because there's a parking problem. Right now, we're allowing them to rent out 6 spaces, and we are not going to be allowing any construction company to rent a parking space in our lot. We just did it because I liked Michael. We're having a problem right now with the restaurant. When parents pick up their kids, they park on the alley. They park in the residential streets. You have kids that are cutting through. It's dangerous. And you know what? That's really all I wanted to say. It's just it's the parking. It's the safety of our children that I'm really concerned about. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now your turn.
Ready? All right. My name is Marnie Therian. I am a resident at 207 Austin Avenue. Single family home. I've written a letter that hopefully all of you have received today. I had pointed out 3 problems that I have with this proposal. 3 variances that I don't understand why would be allowed. One is the height. Currently, this is zoned for a neighborhood business. It's 36 feet with a maximum height restriction. The building across the street, that is a new building. I spoke with the architect today. It is 36 feet. This building is not 48, it is 52, as you said the other day, correct? I believe it's 52. The second is the privacy aspect of it. This building, if you look at all of these pictures, there are additional trees that have been added into these photos. They don't exist. In the picture that I submitted in my letter today, it has a picture straight from my backyard through 2 more backyards directly in the line of sight of the building. It will be a fishbowl in all of our backyards. Not happy about that. And the last one is the parking. 1.2 for 2 spaces. These are probably going to be young people. I had friends when I was in my 20s, and I had lots of people over. This is pretty typical. Where are these people going to park? We do not have parking on either of these side streets, even though they've said they won't have permits. People park on our street all the time. I've been doing it for 7 years. There's no problem with that. Also, I worked in corporate real estate for 20 years, or almost 20 years. So the number 1 rule was we had to go to any site that was proposed to us and see what was in the area. So I've walked this area for the last 2 days and seen that this building is inconsistent with what's around. When they talk about 808 Main, that building was built in 1940. All of those people bought those homes well after that building was built. This building, if you have to walk considerably south to go into the business district in order to get buildings of that height, there's 1 building with balconies all the way almost at the corner of 11 and Main. All of the other ones, the highest balcony is at the 2nd floor. Most of those buildings have brick walls without any windows. And you're talking about putting a 4-story building with 12 units with windows and balconies looking into our bed. It changes the quality of life that most of us, well, all of us that live there. I live 3 houses in from that, not including that lot. There is a clear view. I'm not happy about that. And finally, the warning bell, to your point. I don't want a warning bell. It's quiet in our neighborhood. Have a flashing light. There's just the other unit across that's going to expect a warning. I do not want a warning bell. That's final. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And I spent the day for a few hours today, going around and asking my neighbors. Not one of them declined to sign that letter, as well as all the businesses that I went to as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this issue? There's 2 or 3 back there. Come on up.
Hello, my name is Suzanne Dimitri. Excuse me, and I live in the closest house to the proposed development. I have the same sentiments as everybody in this room has expressed. I appreciate that I was invited to your meeting very much. I regret that I missed it. I would have had other things to say. And I appreciate that the letter went out.
Yes, please address the microphone, please.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yes, go ahead.
There is no part of me that is in agreement with this development. However, I do realize that I am powerless to change it. I'm come here today to ask that you would please, whatever variance they get in height, that I also get for a fencing in my backyard, a wall, something to give me my privacy. I believe that this building, whatever it ends up being, will reduce the value of my property, and I'm not interested in living here. I'll be retiring shortly, and I plan on selling, but until then, I'd like to have some privacy in my backyard. And I think it's absolutely spot on. It'll be a danger to the children walking down the street, the people walking to the marketplace. I live on that corner and I see people walk by there all the time. It's a very bad idea. And the building that's going up right now has been a mess for 5 years of dust coming on my house. I don't know if there's any timeline on this building going up, but I haven't been able to make improvements to my exterior of my home because it's filthy. And that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you. Way in the back there.
John Davids, 118 Crane. My wife and I have lived on Crane for 34 years, I guess. It's one block north of Austin. I'm here to support the letter that Marnie wrote that I think kind of captures the feelings of the neighborhood about this project, that it's too big, too tall. The parking, I don't believe at all 1.2 per unit, per 1 and 2 bedroom units is nearly enough parking, not only just for the residents, but for their guests. But the biggest problem for me, and we discussed this at the Thursday meeting, are the balconies. Even with a 4-foot knee wall, those balconies, you're looking right into people's backyards. I think it's really intrusive to private neighborhoods to be sitting in your backyard, enjoying yourself, and have people on balconies kind of staring down. You're hearing them, you're seeing them, they're seeing you. And I don't think there's any way to address that with having balconies on the west side of the building. I think that's my biggest issue with the project. The height is an issue, the parking is an issue, but the biggest issue are these balconies that are right in the neighborhood and people looking into people's backyards. I think it's a bad precedent to set for multifamily units next to neighborhoods. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this agenda item? There's a hand there.
Hi.
Yourself, please, 3 minutes.
My name is Katie WROK. I own a home on North Pleasant Street, just a few blocks from this site. I'm generally supportive of this apartment building. We're in a nationwide housing shortage, and we also have a housing shortage here in Oakland County. While these units might not be AMI affordable, adding units, as my colleague Alex mentioned, brings down the cost of all average units. I'm concerned about the visibility triangles. I bike and walk to Hollywood Market using Austin, so I'd like to see safety measures to put the onus on drivers here to be safe and go slower rather than on pedestrians. I agree that an alarm is not a great solution, but again, I'm supportive of this, and I do think that there's a way around this. I also love that the petitioner is asking for fewer than 1 parking space per bedroom. My 4-year-old son has his own bedroom. He does not drive his own car. In fact, my husband and I share a car. We have 1 car for 3 people in a 3-bedroom house, and I just live a few blocks from here. I have a cargo bike, which I rode here tonight, and this location is a perfect location to live car-free or car-light in Royal Oak. You can walk to get groceries. You can walk to your job, perhaps at the middle school or someplace downtown. If we're not going to allow apartment buildings 3 blocks from downtown, a busy downtown, one of the destinations of Oakland County, I don't understand where we're going to allow them. To speak to the privacy issue, my house was built in 1943 on North Pleasant Street. I have 2 windows in my bedroom, one on the north, one on the south side, and they look into the bedrooms of my 2 next door neighbors, about 12 feet away. Privacy does not exist in these neighborhoods. The lack of privacy was baked in. I just think that that's a straw man argument, and I am tired of people saying it, because if there was privacy in old houses, then my house would be further from my neighbors. Again, I'm in support of this project. I am concerned about the visibility. I want the onus to be on the drivers of the cars and not on the middle schoolers walking by here. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Other way in the back there in the gray.
Hi, my name is Amber Long, and my husband and 2 kids. We've been here for 12 years. We started off as renters, and now we own our house. In general, just like my colleague Katie, I'm in favor of the project. There are some things that I would like to see changed. We have 2 kids. Well, one is both are young adults, and both would like to move out and stay here, but cannot afford Royal Oak at the current time. Both of my Gen Z kids have several friends that are non-drivers. My husband and I share a car. So we are a family of car-light people, and our kids have friends that are either sharing cars with their partners or don't drive at all. So I appreciate the fewer parking space requirement on this development. It seems like every time there's a multifamily thing that comes up on 11 Mile, on 13 Mile, on Main Street, on Washington, on 4th Street, there's always a complaint about it. It can't be here, it can't be here, it can't be here, it can't be here. I just really want to say I'm really just want to have more housing for people that need housing and that want to stay here in Royal Oak or want to move here to Royal Oak. I love that this place has an elevator. I would love to see more green space. I like the biking, the bike racks and the storage for biking. Also, I would prefer that there is greater visibility for the kids that are walking to and from school. Royal Oak does not have a busing service, so lots of kids ride or bike to school. Parents drop their kids off not right in the front of the school. They will drop them off like where someone else said at the restaurant, and the kids will walk there. I would really love to see that the kids are going to be safe going to and from the school. Also, I would, green space and visibility for the kids coming to the school. I know that because Royal Oak doesn't have busing, that kids are going to be going to school, and more housing and dead children is not equal, so I want to make sure that we have places for people to live and kids that can be safe. Also would prefer something as opposed to a bell, something like a light or something that does put the responsibility of the safety of the kids on the drivers. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Other citizens right here. Well, we got one there, but she'll go first.
Oh, okay.
You go first.
Hi, my name is Jen Cherry Benson. I moved here 3 years ago with my husband Adam. We live at 118 Willis. That is directly also affected by all of these balconies. There's been some talk and discussion about how does privacy matter. Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind passing those along. I printed out some pictures of the developers saying that there are tree space to shelter our backyard and to make our privacy. And he did talk about a wall. Thank you for that. But on the first page, you will see what they put in their plans, as this is an overlooking aerial view of where the trees are in our neighborhood. If you turn the page, you will see I have circled and highlighted that all these trees are either fake or embellished. We are a petri dish, and I did not move to this beautiful city of Royal Oak from downtown Chicago to limit the movements in my own backyard. There is a 25-foot pine tree that you will see in the next couple of pictures that is 25 feet at the southwest corridor of where this building is being planned to be built. 25 feet. If you have a moment, please walk through our neighborhood. Look at that tree and then imagine twice the size overlooming you, looking over you. And then I want you to turn around and I want you to look at my house where children play. And then I want you to look at the house next door where Suzanne and Mike's grandchildren play. We talk about the safety and security of our children. And in your planning developments, you say balconies cannot look on residential areas. This is a direct violation of what you guys wrote in your new plans. The variances of the height at 52 feet. I'm happy with new housing. I moved here to be a part of the community. I want more people to experience this. They say that privacy has always been an issue in this city. No, that's not true. I did not move. None of my neighbors moved to this area because there was going to be a giant condo there. We wouldn't have chosen our homes. I know my house, the house that I bought from Donna, who used to have Nikki's Greek Diner, that has been a huge pillar in our community. I wrote her a letter saying that I was going to be that, and I have been. I've started multiple social groups here in the city. I want to be a viable member of the community, but I need to feel safe. It's going to change the trajectory of how I act in my own backyard, how I garden, the comings and goings of my husband and myself. They will be able to see whether or not someone is home, whether I am home alone. This is an emotional issue because I want this city to thrive. And I want us all to feel safe and protected.
All right, thank you. There was the gentleman back there.
My name is Brent Plaxton. I live at 500 Helene, way away from this. But someday this is going to affect me. Excellent plan. I can't imagine a better
Can
plan for
you please address the
I can't imagine a better plan for this spot. They did a very fine job. I've worked on and off in construction for 35 years. It's not what I currently do, but I've done it and I know people in it. You don't need a warning bell. You need a one-way parking lot. In off of Austin, out onto Main Street. Nobody's disturbed. It makes it very simple. They have one-way parking lots all over the places, like in places like Chicago. Unfortunately, this is not too far out of the zone of downtown. And what you don't pass today, in 10, 15 years from now, will end up getting passed. Because the downtown, since I have lived here in 25 years, has continually, slowly expanded. And that's what downtowns do. That's it. I only needed a minute. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you. All right, is there other citizens who'd like to come forward and speak on this agenda item? Going once. One more over there.
Hello, my name is Maggie DeAlmond. I live at 126 Austin Avenue. I'm very close to I'm the closest to the condo that's being built right now. I just want to say that we've been impacted with building vehicles, with traffic, with the streets being closed at any given moment, so that we can't even get to our property sometimes because everything's closed off. I am concerned about where the new set of construction vehicles will park if they're not going to be able to park at the dental office, as we were told that might be a possibility. So I would like to have that question answered. I would also like to talk about the issue of privacy, that I don't feel that I've been unsafe in my neighborhood because I know my neighbors. I know the long-term residents on my block. I don't feel that they're taking advantage of my windows being open or the shades being up, but I can always close them if I want. But I can't close my backyard to the condos looking down into my garden, my friends on my back deck or my patio. And thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Any other citizens wish to speak on this agenda item? I'm pausing just to make sure. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment, and I'm going to bring the discussion back to the commissioners to discuss it amongst themselves, direct questions to staff, council, or the petitioner, or make a motion. Commissioner Douglas.
I would like to, would the petitioner be interested, should we give them an opportunity to answer any questions or issues that may have come up that they haven't already addressed?
I have no problem with that suggestion. Do the petitioners have any?
Because I have a question.
Oh, okay, but they need to come up to the microphone or they can't.
Yes, they do.
Yes, so come on up.
Sure. We cover a couple issues that you've raised and that have been raised. First, let's talk about parking. So first of all, the parking of 1.2 has been found to be acceptable in other locations. You've got 30 units, 24 units, I'm sorry. So 12 are one bedroom, and generally those are overwhelmingly one car per unit. You've got 12 two bedroom. We anticipate, based on the statistics, that we'll have 2 cars for 6 of those and 1 car for the other 6. As has been mentioned, not everybody has 2 cars, even though they run a 2-bedroom unit. And many times, both bedrooms aren't occupied. People use the second bedroom for an office. There's a lot of work from home or work from apartment these days. And so we look at that. Plus, you then take away from that the fact that the statistics now are showing in Royal Oak that about 10% of the new builds in apartments, 10% of the tenants do not have cars at all, as has been mentioned. So you reduce that out, and then you reduce out the fact that generally you have 20% of the people are either on vacation, gone on business, or whatever, and they're not using their spaces. So the Bianchis are very comfortable with the 29 spaces. They have to provide parking for their residents, otherwise this doesn't work. So that we believe very firmly that will work. Let's talk about the safety issue. I said this at the beginning. We have a lot of traffic and a lot of people coming there right now. This is going to improve the situation. And this is very simple. If we have anybody walking, not just school children, but anybody nearby, we can, I think, just talking to Bianchi's, like the idea of a light, because that light will be visible to people who are walking. We have an arm at each drive in exiting the first floor parking area. So first of all, cars can't rush out. There's an arm, and when they stop, that will trigger the light, and that will improve safety. The overall plan improves safety over what is there now, because as I mentioned, on busy days we have upwards of 200 people coming and going, and most of them are using their own vehicles, and that will definitely be an improvement. With respect to the height, I've already addressed the fact we have right across the street a tall 4-story building that was built in 1940 that has not had any negative impact on the community and on that side of the street or otherwise that anyone has ever heard of. And finally, let's talk about the balconies. First of all, and I hate to have to say this, but what is wrong with being a tenant in Royal Oak? Tenants vote, they pay taxes through their tax payment, they go to church here in Royal Oak. In several of the places that I've been involved with in siting here and subsequently knowing about the rent rolls, you know who their number one renters are? Healthcare professionals. Those are not people who are going to be intruding on other people. And the fact is, even if you take the balconies away, you're going to have windows. So those windows, whatever way you want to spin it, the situation is that we have no demonstrated evidence in this city that because somebody is on a 3rd or 4th floor, they're spending their entire day peering into somebody's backyard. It's not happening. I've asked the police chief about it 6 months ago. It doesn't happen. I understand the concern, but we have given a 4-foot screening, which will be solid, or a very heavy mesh, because I think that what we heard when we went to the meeting is that they don't want people sitting there using the neighborhood as entertainment. Well, first of all, I object with that characterization of renters, but I also believe that this solves the majority of the problem. And if somebody is doing that, they can call us or call the police. If that's a concern. But that, I think, really is an issue that we have resolved that has occurred at other locations in and around the downtown area and otherwise, and that has not had any negative impact or any undue burden on privacy in the residential area. So I hope that common sense will prevail on that issue because I believe that renters are do have positive impact on this city. And as we know, many people who rent here in Royal Oak also eventually end up buying a home. It's test marketing, and that's what happens. And that is also something that we are very pleased to have because they understand this is a welcoming community to all kinds of people. So, that being said, I'll answer any other questions that you have, but I wanted to strike at least those 4 issues, which I think were mentioned several times during the public comment.
Commissioner Douglas.
Well, actually, the illustration that you, what?
Microphone.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you all from the speaker.
The illustration you have of your garage does not show the arm controlling cars exiting from it. So I think that, and the idea of a light as opposed to a buzzer, I think resolves my issue about the sight lines coming out onto Austin. So that was a question that you've answered, anticipated.
Yes, we can certainly add that to the plan, but we said that to the neighbors, and we're saying it again today, and we will add it to the plan if the project moves forward. Thank you.
All right. Other questions for the petitioner while we got him up here? I have a question, but I think it might be for Mr. Krieger, and that is about I should have asked this before. I was a little perplexed about the solid screening on the balconies. What do you mean by that? This is not going to be something that the wind can go through? What are you talking about here? What kind of materials?
On the west side?
Yeah.
So what we were depicting in the pages that we gave you was actually just do a half wall. So it's that same material.
Brick?
So it'd be solid.
It'd be brick material?
Yes.
Oh, okay, with scuppers or something?
That's correct. Yep, exactly. Yeah, the idea was just to make it solid, but as Dennis mentioned, or like a mesh, but either way, it's something that you cannot see through. That's the idea.
All right, thanks. Other questions for the petitioners? Well, we got them up here. We can always have them sit down and stand back up again, but. All right, I think you can have a seat for now. Discussion among the commissioners here. Okay, well, I will ask a question of our legal and planning staff. I heard something in some of the comments. There was a lot of comments. I thought a lot of interesting comments, but one that threw me off a little bit is about that the balconies would not be allowed. I want a clarification from Mr. Twing here. I read the zoning ordinance for multifamily for standards, and I'm talking about 77030C2 and 3. That's what I want to talk about. I read this to say that if you're going to do multifamily, you shall design outdoor spaces such as balconies, arcades, terraces, decks, etc. Here we have a multi-level, and so the only outdoor space there can be is balconies. There's also a provision in the same section that says you're going to minimize any privacy infringements on the neighboring properties. I see this as the public policy of the city of Royal Oak is we want multifamily to have outdoor spaces, and in this situation, that would be balconies. And we recognize there may be some privacy infringements. We're going to try to minimize those. That's how I read the public policy of the city of Royal Oak. I'd like your view on that. What is this? What is this section telling us?
Well, I think you're correct in that you want the developer to address outdoor spaces in some fashion as part of your review. What those outdoor spaces and how you would approve them, I think, is somewhat subjective to your review of those, and do they meet both standards? Are they minimizing any impact in terms of their placement and location and design? Are they meeting the intent of that section? So I think as part of your review under the PUD, you can concur that the design is meeting those provisions, or you can ask for suggested revisions. I would just point out there is an outside amenity that's not associated with a balcony. I would also point out that the balconies would be permitted on a shorter building without any kind of discussion. So the balconies that we're really talking about on the west side of the building are 3. They're the penthouse building and the amenity space. So every other balcony on the west side of the building would be permitted at 36 feet. So.
Okay, not prohibited, but permitted if
Yes.
it was a
Right.
lower building.
Right.
Okay. All right. I have I had another question here, but I'm just gonna pause and send it to my colleagues here.
So I guess this question will be for Mr. Twing. If I look at the 5 listed deviations from the neighborhood business, I'm just trying to understand in my own head. Obviously, it was the applicant's choice to go the route of a PUD versus propose a project with the underlying existing neighborhood business zoning. If they chose to go with the underlying zoning, the neighborhood business zoning, the 5 deviations listed would still essentially be deviations under that zoning, and that's it, correct? And I think we've resolved the triangle
Yes, it just
setback.
would be a different approach. Rather than a planned unit development, they could come here for site plan review, and they would be listed as variances for the zoning board of appeals.
And we would have essentially much less leeway as a body to
correct
through in terms of our lens to look at. Okay. All right, that answers my question.
Mr. Ellison.
Yeah, I've been up here, excuse me, a lot of years, and we've just discussed a lot of high-rise residential areas. We always have a discussion about the balconies, and there is no clear answer. But there's always one observation that people seem to forget about, and that is we live in Michigan, not in Florida. These balconies are not going to be used in the winter. They'll be used in the summer, 3-4 months if we're lucky. And it's the same with being out in your backyard, whatever it is, you're sitting around your table, or your kids are playing. Again, your outdoor activities in these neighborhoods are limited by the weather conditions, and that's a fact. But we're not talking about that. We're assuming that these balconies are going to be a problem, 365 days a year, and it never turns out that way. I remember apartment complex we did in the north end of town. This is a big issue, and excuse me. Those were a big issue, and since they were built, we haven't heard a peep out of anybody. I've talked to people that live up there. It's not a problem because people are going about their life. The people that live in the houses are going about their lives. People that live in the apartments are going about their lives. They don't have time to stand on their balcony and spy on their neighbors. It just doesn't happen. I think it's an invented fantasy sometimes. It's a big problem, and it's not.
All right. Other comments? I'm going to make another one just to keep the conversation going. First of all, I want to state for the record, we received a bunch of stuff late, okay, at like 3 o'clock this afternoon. Personally, I read everything, but I had to squeeze it in. I hope the other parties did. But I read everything, just so everybody knows. And I've been out to the site multiple times, just so everybody knows. I do have to say, I don't recall a single time. My daughter lives in the Amber apartments, the micro apartments, where they have one parking space per unit, and no problems there. They're not overparked. They don't have a problem there. This is a little bit different. I don't think we've ever approved a situation where we had 36 bedrooms and we're going to have 29 parking spaces. To me, that's not one. That's 1.2 per units, but it's 0.8 per bedroom. And these are not small units. The one-bedroom units on the second, third floor are as big as my first house, and the penthouses are all bigger than my current house. These are not small units. So that's a concern to me. I don't know if it's dispositive, but to my knowledge, we've never approved parking in this ratio before. Mr. Ellison.
A couple of observations on that. First of all, we've got buses running up and down Main Street all the time. It's a major bus route. So people are riding buses more often. Rapid Trans, or not Rapid Trans, but public transportation is available and people use it. And that's what's made the apartments on 11 Mile work so well, is because the people that are going into those units, they don't have cars. They don't need cars. They take the buses to wherever they're going. That is life that's out there. That's the people that's running these. But to go back and classify every bedroom as a bed, it's not true. I go into people's homes all the time. The bedroom is now an office. It's not used as a bedroom, so it doesn't add to the cars. It doesn't add to the people living in there. It's a space where they can put their office in. And I think with this type of unit and the type of renter coming in here, that's what we're going to see. So I don't think the parking is a big issue at all. And again, when your people are in your apartments and they're driving in the morning to work and they're coming home at night. They're not driving all over. It's not like you've got a business where they're driving in and out all day long. So the traffic is going to be lower, but they'll park the cars, and I'm not seeing it as too big a problem.
All right, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, since we're on the topic of parking, when I first saw the statistic of 1.2, I'm glad you asked about the bedrooms. It does appear on the surface to be a little lean. I know that we've had other properties where we've challenged the conventional parking norms of 1970. We know that parking drives less green space. It drives, less better outcomes for people because you're designing around cars, not people. I think the petitioner brought up a few good points that we're seeing in private industry, at least with my experience dealing with parking, where folks aren't having 2 cars per 2-bedroom apartment. Folks are finding other ways to find transportation. We are seeing in Royal Oak there's a lot of folks that choose to live here and move here, especially in rentable units, because there are so many amenities, literally a grocery store across the way, you have a downtown nearby, I know of people that I've spoken to that have discussed how it's a lot less costly for them to Uber when they have to go somewhere than it is to actually pay the entire freight, insurance, gasoline, and all the maintenance of an automobile. And so some of those trends are proved out in other municipalities that I've seen nearby and far away and in growing communities. I think ultimately, though, when you look at parking, it is something that folks who finance these projects look at very, very closely. And they have to, before they lend their money, they have to make sure that the parking ratios are acceptable. So the burden goes a lot on the developer in order to be able to prove that. And ultimately, they will not be able to rent these places if there is a shortage. And so that's a big risk and a big gamble. Or they charge less for the units because there isn't comfortable parking. But what we've seen in developments where we have trusted the developer and trusted their banks in particular to finance their projects, where they've had lower parking ratios, we have not seen some of the negative outcomes that one would expect. So I think it's interesting with the bedrooms, but I also know what the financing institutions make these developers go through in order to prove the case, given the financial marketability of the model.
All right. Mr. Cantina?
So since we're talking about parking, I'll just cover off on the topic. So yeah, there's significant data that shows reduced parking requirements and ratios are okay. We significantly overpark our projects today. I think if any trip to a big box store will sort of evidence that. We overvalue parking for our projects. This is obviously a hot button issue in this discussion here. And I think we overvalue that parking very inappropriately. To me, in my opinion, guest parking for projects like this shouldn't really be the responsibility of the project. When you're building a single family home, you're not necessarily thinking about that holiday party and where all your guests are going to park. You're thinking about parking to accommodate that family's use of that home. So I think the parking issue is it's certainly something you want to study carefully, but I don't see it an issue on this particular project, especially considering you are close to a downtown area. I know there was lots of comments about parking on Austin. To be quite honest, non-permitted street parking is available to all residents. Anyone that's using this city, whether they live here or they're visiting, that parking is available to them. So I don't see the reduced parking ratio of this particular project being as big of a concern for me based on what it is and where it is.
All right. Mr. Esmond.
Yes, Mr. Swing, just a quick question for you. Could you just, for my clarification, maybe for the clarification of everybody in the room, explain the difference between opting for a preliminary site plan review versus a final review?
The preliminary is your option in the sense of there are revisions to the site plan that you would like to see the petitioner come back within 6 months under the ordinance. So if the site plan under the PUD, assuming you're going to recommend approval, if you were going to recommend denial, it's not commentary, but if there were significant or revisions you'd want to see, you might approve it preliminarily, tell the petitioner bring back revisions, and they have 6 months to do so under the ordinance, and then you can consider a final. Or if you're considering recommending approval and everything's been addressed, or are there minor changes, you can just move to the final and recommend it up to the city commission.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This area is, or this site is zoned neighborhood business. And the zoning for neighborhood business allows residential units above a commercial ground floor use. And if the developer were bringing us a plan with ground floor retail and then residential on the upper floors, they wouldn't even have to go through this public hearing process. They might wind up at the zoning board for a couple of variances here. But the only thing that brings it to the level of this public hearing is the fact that instead of having commercial on the ground floor, they don't. They have their parking on the ground floor. There are a lot of businesses or a lot of uses that could go into this site that are way less friendly and desirable than residential. In fact, right now, you've got a business with potentially 200 doors slamming throughout the course of the day. And I should have mentioned this earlier. I'm a patron of the Bianchi Salon, but that does not influence my opinion here. We as a planning commission and we as a city do not tell people what projects to bring us. We as a planning commission receive applications from people who want to build in our city, and they want to build in our city because people want to live here, and businesses want to serve the people who live here. So it's our job to listen to the plans that they bring before us, the proposals that they bring to us, and consider those. So you know, to say that the city, we did not bring this, the developer brought it to us. We are in the process of developing a new master plan for our city. And one of the questions was, how do we accommodate demand? How do we accommodate that growth? And the very strong consensus was that we should not be developing in our single-family neighborhoods, and that the appropriate place for expansion to meet demand was on major corridors. And the support for this has been overwhelming through the thousands and thousands of points of contact the city has had with people in the city. It is our major corridors where new development should take place. And the demand in Royal Oak and in Metro Detroit is largely for rentals, for multifamily development. So we're responding to demand, and we're responding to the expectations of our city. And I will echo something that was said earlier, that somehow people seem to think that renters are, you know, I don't know, criminals, bad people. We had a letter that said there's going to be a bunch of drunk college kids living there. And I actively resent that implication. People want to live in rental housing for many reasons. There are families who want to live in rental housing, and they want to live in our city. They want to be a part of our community. They want to shop at our stores. They want to attend our churches. They want to be a part of our community. As I think Mr. Ellison said, many of them live in rental housing as a prelude to buying housing here. And I believe that I certainly, as a city commissioner and a planning commissioner, welcome those new people who want to love Royal Oak as much as all of we do.
All right, is there other comments? And we're on the side of the table here. Other comments? Because I want to ask a question following up Commissioner Douglas' comment. I just want a clarification there from Mr. Twing or council. Just so I'm clear on this, because you said something there that if they had a business on the first floor, they wouldn't have to come to the planning commission? Is that what you're...
They wouldn't need a public hearing and a special land use. That would just be a site plan review. So they'd be here, but it would just be for the physical conditions of the building.
Okay, and Mr. Twing, is that's correct? And I mean, because I'm looking at, they would still have a height, 36 inches, or 36 feet, and the parking would still be issues, but those would not be.
There'd still be some issues, but I think the major one, and the reason they're choosing to go this route, is because of the use on the ground floor.
Okay, and I'm not trying to argue, but I'm just responding to that. I wanted a clarification. If they had a coffee shop on the ground floor, they would not have to come to the planning commission?
I don't want to get into speculation because I don't know how big the coffee shop is. I mean, technically you could put a coffee shop in this amenity space, and then is that sufficient to be used? You've got an amenity space that takes up all but 60 feet of frontage. It's not a business. It's not a separate activity. So it's where it's in your discretion on it. And I think they've applied for the PUD process. We didn't tell them to go down that road.
Well, I understand.
They have several other options they could have pursued. Some of those would have been here. Some of those would have been here in the zoning board. Some of those might have been a conditional rezoning. So this is really, as Commissioner Douglas said, this is their request, and you're reacting to their request. And getting into speculation of what
Well,
they did
yeah, I
something
don't want to
different.
confuse. It just seems that once they apply for the PUD, they have to come here, right?
Yes,
So they had to come here for PUD.
yes. They have to come here for any rezoning.
Okay, but sort of what I thought. Okay. All right. Other comments? Questions? Questions for the petitioner? Questions for each other? Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I just have one question for the petitioner. The idea was brought up at public comment about why traffic would have to be dispersed on Austin, from the outbound. If you could flip that and have a one-way, is there a reason why you couldn't have the inbound be on Austin and the outbound be on Main?
I'll just say one quick thing, and I'll let Dennis chime in. The only thing I would say is that by having it on Main Street and Austin, is you're not focusing traffic on Austin. Folks would have to go on Austin to then turn in.
Okay, so there's a
this way,
trade-off.
there's options, so you're letting them split different ways.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was generally it. And also, in my experience in most of these buildings where you have the podium, for safety and security, you want to have 2 ingress and egress points. If one ever gets blocked, there's another way to get into the building.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Mr. Contino?
I actually just have a quick question for the applicant as well with respect to the pergola that is indicated on the rooftop balcony space. What is the height of that? Does that go beyond the 52 feet? Or how far
Tim,
beyond the 52 feet?
I don't know offhand. Tim, could you pull up the plans, please? You zoom in. I can't read that. It's basically in line with the top. See the windows up there at the top?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's in line with. So it's not as tall as the parapet, which is the very top of the wall.
Got it. Okay, so it's below all those dimensions then?
That's correct, yes.
All right,
Yep.
thank you.
Commissioner Douglas?
Yeah, I'd like to, so this goes to the city commission, right? So I would like to move that the planning commission recommend this proposal to the city commission with the contingencies as listed, adding to it the requirement that there be traffic arms at the entrances to the parking area, and that there be a warning light flashing on the Austin exit.
Okay, traffic arms on both entrance exits, flashing light on the Austin side.
Right.
Okay.
And maybe something else if,
No, I was just going to ask you proposing this as a final plan or
I'm going to say final plan.
Okay, the motion is to recommend approval of the PUD with the listed contingencies provided by the department and the added contingencies that a traffic arm be installed at both entrance exits and a flashing warning light on the Austin entrance exit. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there a second?
There is a second. I would like to ask the motion maker if you would consider adding another contingency. As Mr. Commonwealth knows, a lot of people who choose to live in this situation also choose to cycle, and frankly, bike racks just don't cut it. Nice bikes are very expensive, and they can be stolen incredibly easily. I'm hoping the petitioner would be willing to step up the bike rack game so we can have a little more security for people's nice bicycles, if you're willing to consider that as an amendment.
And what form would that take?
Bike lockers or something to that effect?
Sorry.
Yeah, please.
I'm allowed to speak, but we can very easily add a bike room in the amenity space.
There you go.
So folks can then go right out through the garage, or probably not out the main street. We could have power in there for those who have electric bikes, things like that.
Then that's my motion, to add a secure bike storage space to the property.
Well, procedurally, Clyde already seconded the motion, so he proposed an amendment to the motion, which you can then second, and then it puts us in the same spot.
A second.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's been yes, wait, I'm sorry, it's not your turn. All right, so what we have here is motion to amend Commissioner Douglas's motion to add a bike room in the amenities area. That was the motion. You seconded it.
To provide secure bike storage wherever they might put it.
Okay, secure bike storage. Is that fine?
Yep.
Okay. So, do we have to vote on the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. So, the amendment proposed, which was seconded by Commissioner Douglas, is to amend Commissioner Douglas' motion to add secure bike storage. Is there a discussion on this proposed amendment? Okay.
This is the vote just on the amendment.
Just on the amendment, so we get the full, okay. All those in favor of the motion to amend, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so now the complete motion is, the motion is to recommend approval of the PUD with all the listed contingencies by the department, traffic ramps on both entrance exits, flashing warning light on Austin, and secure bike storage. That's the motion, which was seconded. Yes.
I think we should, because of the question that came from the audience, clarify this is a recommendation to the city commission. It still has to go in front of them, so people, you will have an opportunity to address the city committee. I'm sorry. This is a recommendation to the city commission, so you'll still have an opportunity to address the city commission on this entire site plan. All we're doing it is approving it from our level at the planning commission, recommending to them that they approve it as well.
And just to clarify, that's because this commission doesn't have the power to rezone. Only the city commission can grant a rezoning, so we can only recommend. All right. Is there further discussion on this motion? Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, so I just want to address some of the questions and issues that were brought up at public comment. I'm grateful that everyone came out here tonight to talk about some of the concerns you have with the project. The input is really understood. I have a whole list of notes here, and kind of going through these notes, certainly there are a number of issues that we have to, think about and contemplate as a planning commission, and then subsequently as a city commission. There's no, I think, question that there's a housing affordability issue in our city. The city commission has been very open and honest about inappropriate locations, attracting developments that will help increase the supply of housing, which affects not just the supply, but also the affordability. We have done a great job, I think, as a community over the last 10, 20 years, growing property values, but they're at a point now where a person making AMI in this particular, region would find it very difficult to find a place to live in Royal Oak. I have 3 kids. I've said this before. If one of them became a police officer, a teacher, a letter carrier, or any other sort of honorable work, they would not, and be very hard for them to find a suitable home in the city of Royal Oak, in the city they were raised in and grew up in and spent their entire life in. And so this issue at a 10,000 foot level, I hope as a community we agree that we have a housing issue in this country, it affects Royal Oak, and we can do things about it. So now what you've seen is a community that has grown, it's attractive. We have parks, 52 parks. We're growing our parks for an inner ring suburb. We have more parks than I think any of our neighbors could ever imagine. We have family-oriented events. We have a thriving downtown. We have a school district that's amazing. I think it's great. My wife's a teacher. She says it's great for our kids, so I'll trust her judgment on that. And so, which makes our community more desirable. So it's good for us to live here. Our quality of life is very high. Folks want to come back. Folks want to retire here. They want to downsize here. They want to stay in the community they've lived in for 50, 60 years. And so this issue is ever present, and we have to do something about it. So the question is always where and how. And I think that's where we start to have some good dialogue and discussion. When I look at this objectively as a planning commissioner, this is undeniably Main Street. It's a couple blocks from our central business district, maybe 500 feet, maybe 1,000 if you consider, the Hyatt Place part of the CBD or not. And so, we're going to see along our main roads, 13 Mile, we're going to see along Main Street, we're going to see folks transition properties, redevelop them, and address some of the housing needs that we have in the community. Because that is a purview of the community at large. I think we all agree there's a housing issue. This isn't affecting, so I think what I heard in my notes that I took away there were 2, maybe 3 concerns. One dealing with the exit onto Austin and the safety concerns, especially with middle schoolers traveling back and forth. I drop my kids off most days on the middle school, debatable. I like to think I do it more often, but my wife says I don't do it as much as I should. But I see that traffic every day. I come out on Austin sometimes. And I think that, to me, what's going to be very interesting when this comes to the City Commission is understanding that safety mechanism. So if this motion passes, I really want to understand the fidelity of that safety mechanism, the provability of it, maybe restricting the hours of exiting onto Austin at certain times of the day. I encourage the petitioner, if this passes, to really place a little bit of time on that. It's unlikely that something would happen, but the consequences are immeasurable. The other is parking and privacy. So parking, I got to tell you, I've, fortunate or unfortunate, in my volunteer life and in my private life, I've looked at a lot of parking studies and solved issues through technology, a number of different projects I've worked on with parking. And, I got to tell you, I do feel satisfied with the parking ratios. I feel that, based on the type of units that are going in here and some of the elements that, in the analysis that the petitioner brought up, match and relate to things we're seeing all over the country. Privacy is the big thing, and I understand and can't argue with the strong feelings people have about getting new neighbors and what that means from a privacy point of view. What I can say is we do live in Royal Oak, and we are very close to each other anyhow. When I'm in my backyard with my family, I can look into 5 different windows of my neighbors that peer down and, can see my family and I. We have a little pool back there, and I think it's more harm to them when I'm in the pool looking into my backyard. So I think I'm the deterrent, but maybe it's different in other situations. But I look at the setbacks and I look at some of the measures the petitioner has taken to recess the balconies. And even if single-family homes were built along that, when you have perpendicular properties to each other, you're going to have a neighbor, maybe maybe you don't know, looking into your property, whether that's 3 stories, 4 stories, or 2 stories, 36 foot, 48 foot. It's going to happen no matter what. It could be an office building there, people working all day and peering into the backyard. So being along Main Street, neighborhood streets running perpendicular, no matter what is built on those streets, you're going to have that issue no matter what. And I'd like to think that's something that, we all sort of understand living here in a highly densely populated area, especially a few blocks outside of downtown. But that doesn't mean I don't empathize with the feelings that people have about having more neighbors and, the perception of those people perhaps looking at them in their backyard. I get it. But the job that we have up here on the Planning Commission, as Commissioner Douglas outlined, is we have some criteria we have to look at. We have to look at the community benefits. We have to look at the impact to the community. Is it solving an overall issue for our city? And so those are all the things that we have to balance on a scale. And so I think other than those issues, I think it's something that the city is really looking for. But 2 out of 3, I'm comfortable with. And then the privacy one, I think has been mitigated as much as possible. And I don't know how even allowed uses on that property would mitigate privacy issues.
All right. Mr. Cantina.
So I have an issue with our community benefits guidelines, which is really discussion for another time. However, the applicant has cited providing several benefits that are ostensibly from that list that I believe do not meet the intent. And I just want to cover some of those for this body as part of our consideration, because in the conversation around whether this project is in front of us as a neighborhood business project or a PUD, the applicant chose to bring it forward as a PUD. And as part of that, the community benefits that are being provided in exchange for that PUD is something that we need to consider very, very carefully. So I just kind of want to go through some of the items that the applicant proposed and is essentially, sort of requesting credit for as part of those community benefits. The increased insulation value, they've not done an energy model, so this, and to substantiate, that they are making this building any more energy efficient. So I don't necessarily give much credit there. Electric heat pumps for HVAC, that is not really beyond code, but it is certainly much more energy efficient. We see this next one often, LED lighting throughout the project. Again, that's not beyond code. I would challenge any project to light their project without using LED fixtures at this point. The elevator to provide ADA access to all units, again, that's a code requirement. There's no additional give from the applicant with that benefit. Energy Star appliances, again, I think it would be harder to find non-Energy Star appliances to use. Water efficient appliances, they indicated they haven't really gotten this far in the design, and they've got low flow designations, but they really have no plans yet. Lighting timers for all the common areas. This one I do give them credit for. That is something that is non-standard, but will be much more energy efficient. These are all items that they stipulated and provided, just to be clear. Stormwater detention compliance. Again, that's a requirement. That is a minimum table stakes requirement. There's really no credit that should be given for that. So I appreciate the project and I appreciate the applicant pointing all those things out, but I just want us to make sure that we're understanding this community benefit guideline. It's not as strong as it could be, and when applications come in front of us, they're citing many things that we just need to make sure that we consider carefully as to whether or not they're truly a community benefit or not. The residents that live next to Main Street in downtown, they have a very unique situation. But that situation can't necessarily preclude our growth. We have to develop up. Out is not really an option for us. We live in an urban city, as Commissioner Douglas has stated before. We do not want to encourage higher density development in our single family neighborhoods. It needs to be in our more densified areas, which are these major corridors like Main Street. And so the height of the building is just one of the artifacts of the location of it. And neighborhoods that are adjacent to it, it's a known issue in purchasing that property in terms of where you're located. I would like to see the inclusion of renewables for this self-proclaimed nearly all-electric building. There's plenty of rooftop space to be able to have some renewables there. I'd be very curious to see a solar study to understand any impact to any of the properties to the west, any sunshade studies. I believe downtown development will undoubtedly continue to be moving north of 11 Mile. And so this project fits within that. I think our master plan information shows that as well. Many residents cited several issues with the project that's currently being built just to the north of this site. And while I'm sure that's a pain for all of them, that does not factor in or should not factor into our consideration for this project. That project is under very specific rules on how they conduct their project. None of us can predict how this particular applicant may build their project. So that is not a consideration for me. I just want to get it out there as well that I bristle at any negative comments related to renters as well. I agree with all the comments that have been made. Families are renters, teachers are renters, police officers are renters. Rental units are not a negative, and renters are not a negative to our community. Housing is clearly needed and affordability is needed, and increasing the supply can help with that affordability. And I do believe that the applicant, in good faith, had the meeting with the neighbors and attempted to respond to the concerns of privacy to the western neighbors, and that is all the comments that I have. Thank you.
All right. I'm sorry, it's not your turn. We're on this side of the table. I would ask that you be polite and let the process play out the way it's designed to play out. All right. We have other comments here on this side. Okay, well, I'm going to make a couple comments then. First of all, you mentioned the criteria. So there's two sets of criteria that we're looking at. One are mandatory and one set is not mandatory. The mandatory requirements are in 77098C, and if the petitioner does not show those things, does not demonstrate all of them, they can't be entitled to the PUD treatment. Now, we've heard a lot tonight. We heard a lot from the petitioner, from the public, and without getting into detail, I do think that this petitioner met the requirements of 77098C. The second set of criteria are not mandatory. They are things that we should consider as commissioners, and those are at 770129A through I. These, I do not think they met them all. In fact, they didn't even address all of them, which gives me some issue here. For instance, we don't, the 4 stories is something that bothers me. I think it's not completely outlandish, but it is the highest building on that side of the street. I do agree with the comment that was made during the public comment that eventually we're going to probably have a building this high in this site. That's probably true, but there's not one there now, and it would be in excess of the 36 feet, and it would add a set of balconies looking into the neighborhood. So that is something that gives me some pause. And that affects item D, which is impact on the surrounding uses. This is very consistent with the master plan, the direction we're going in. I agree with Commissioner Douglas's, and I think there were other comments. I mean, if we're going to have additional housing and we're going to let the market bring us these housing projects, they're going to be on the corridors. And we've seen that over and over again. So we either want them or we don't want them. And if somebody brings us a good design, we probably should say yes to it, even if it's a PUD, if it's a good design. I can go either way on this. I will say that the height of the building bothers me a little bit. I also want to say about the traffic situation. I appreciate that there's been efforts to address that, but I will say this, the rush hour is between 7 and 8, and the children go to the middle school between 7 and 8. So this is actually an area that there is a lot of traffic, and one of the things that's always bugged me is that the kids go to school in the dark a big chunk of the year, which bothers me. I don't know what to do about that, but there is a safety concern here. So, other than that, I do like the project. If it was sitting at where Demos is or where the Rite Aid is, I would absolutely say yes in a heartbeat, because I like the project. I think it was well designed. But I do have some concerns about where it is. So those are my comments. All right, right down here.
So just to clarify again, as I'm looking at this, even if you reduce to 36 feet, you're looking at 2 balconies that are above the height. So if the building were even at 36 feet, you still have all of those balconies on the side of the building, so it complies. So we're talking about 2 units, which are basically penthouse units that are facing the back neighborhood. Okay. And I reiterate again with the rental situation, apologize. I rented for 2 years. I have 3 little kids. I was in Rochester as I tried to find a house to come back to Royal Oak. It took me 2 years to find a home that fit me, I could afford and be in. I'm located right now, I'm actually over on the north side of town. I back to apartment complex at 13 in Woodward, and I also have the senior co-op directly behind me. I've got windows that are up above that can look down in my yard. I don't see it. I see more interaction with my neighbors on either side, and I've got little kids that are constantly knocking balls in the neighbors' yards to kind of run over, but I get the sense of security and knowing that there's people there, but I think that, I work in an office building in Royal Oak as well. We're on the 3rd floor, and we're right at West Street, and you can look down and I can see probably 15 to 20 yards from where we are, and that's an office setting, and we've got 80 people in our office. There's a law office that's directly below us. I don't see the interest and the intrigue. I don't think there's a lot of people that are out there trying to seek and snoop on their neighbors to that effect.
All right, I'm just going to make another quick comment, make sure there's not, nobody misunderstood my comments. The height of the building is an issue, balconies or no balconies, if they had windows there. I think I've made my statement about the balconies. I look at the zoning ordinance, and the zoning ordinance says, if you're going to have an apartment, multifamily, you're required to try to get outdoor spaces in there, which is a balcony. So that's the policy. We didn't write that. That's the zoning ordinance policy. And when you do that, you're going to try to minimize privacy infringements, which I think these folks did. So to me, the balconies are also not an issue, but the height is an issue. Just to make me clarify my position.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call the question.
All right, Mr. Ellison calls the question, so which means we have to vote on it, which I'm appreciative of. Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote for this, and we're going to start down with the mayor on the motion, which is to recommend to the city commission for approval the PUD with all the listed contingencies plus traffic arms at both entries and exits, and a flashing warning light on Austin, and secure bike storage added, although this is going to be a final, this is the final, right? We're not asking him to come back, so I think that I just put that on the record. Okay. I will start with Mr. Mayor.
Vote yes.
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 I'm a no. All right, the vote passes, though. Congratulations. You're on your way to the city commission. All right.
Can we take 5 minutes?
We're going to take a 5-minute break.
Mr. Chairman, before we do, just for the city attorney, wasn't that motion just to call the question and now we actually have to vote on the question?
Technically, yeah, we should have voted. I call the question.
Oh, is it?
Well, I'd like to have a discussion about
Yeah,
motions later at some point in time, because we've always treated you as a small assembly where you don't need to make motions to change a motion. You can simply agree. You don't need to make a motion to amend it and that. I'd love to have that conversation at another time.
And if we had just said, can we vote now, it wouldn't be calling the question.
Yeah, I think the intent was clear.
Yeah, you're fine.
We're going to get started again. All right, we have another agenda item here. We're back on the record, SP 24-11. Yes.
I'm going to recuse myself for this one.
Oh.
I'm unfamiliar with the petition.
All right, you may recuse yourself
It's gotta be a
and.
new record. It's first meeting.
I mean, there's two ways to get a raise, Brian. One of them's working hard.
All right. Okay, SB-11-15, a site plan for 4507 Delamere Boulevard.
You're correct. It's a simple site plan. They're proposing an addition of almost 1,200 square feet to an existing building that's some 2,640 square feet. The site is zoned general industrial. The proposal really is to add space and have warehouse space primarily to store vehicles. The site does have 2 parking spots at the west end of the site, and under a lease agreement when Delamere was approved, there's also 2 in the right-of-way that we've counted towards the development for a total of 4. That does meet the minimum standard for the usable space in the building when it's finished at some 3,700 gross square feet. The addition would be a little over 27 feet in height, although it appears to be a single story with lifts in the inside. And the existing building is some 15 feet as a 1-story. The conditions that the staff's recommending as part of the site plan approval are regarding potential variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals regarding the existing driveway width that's adjacent to the building currently is under the minimum standard for two-way movement of 20 feet. It's a little, almost 13 feet in width that goes out to Delamere. And again, it's adjacent to the existing building. The addition is back further in some 26, 27 feet. It's fine. 2 is that all waste and recycling would be contained within the building, except for when it's picked up. There is existing landscaping along Delamere. If that's sufficient for the Planning Commission, it's simply accepting it as presented, and then all the other conditions are standard city conditions on site plans in terms of paving, lighting, signage, posting bonds with the building department for the addition.
All right, are there any questions from Mr. Twing before we call the petitioner forward? All right, seeing none, I would ask the petitioner to come forward, introduce your team, and tell us why you're entitled to the relief you're seeking.
Good evening, I'm Danielle Cataray of Cataray Architecture, resident and operating out of Royal Oak. And my client, Paul Chakurian, is the property owner. He also runs the Collier's office at
I
Fourth
manage the Collier's office, so we moved our office here a year and a half ago in the Howard & Howard building, 400 West 4th Street. We have about 20,000 square feet there, which we love, by the way.
So,
Fabulous.
property owner and working here.
Yeah, and former resident. Although.
So yes, Paul is a car collector, and I want to specify that because these are collectible cars that are meant to be inside, and that's the whole point of this addition, is to store them inside a garage. I say that only because I know some of the things that could be a concern is like the property turning into some kind of car lot. It's not the intention at all. There's also no servicing the vehicles here. It's the place is immaculate if you see it. So very clean, everything's internalized, it's private. Yeah, that's really the extent of it. It's a garage addition so that he can store more of his collectible cars.
I don't know who's first. Mr. Ellison.
You're showing some car lifts. Are those floor mounted? They're not post in the ground, they're floor mounted.
They're just 4-post, but they're not drilled into
You're
the
not
ground.
going into the ground, you're
No.
mounting, okay, that's all I need to know.
Is the use of the building for your personal collection, or are you planning on making it available to others to sort of like rent out spots?
Just
that
mine.
sort of thing?
I got a quick question. You said you weren't going into the ground. Now, so I did go there. I probably trespassed. I walked back there and looked. The concrete back there is not in great shape. Are you going to dig new foundations for this, or how are you going to do this if you're not going into the ground?
No, I think that's a different question.
Yeah.
The hoists that you store cars on, you store them stacked up. That's inside, and those are not drilled through the ground. They're just laying flat. The feet.
some sort of platform.
Yeah, the feet. The back of the building where the new addition will go will have we'll have footings and a new floor.
Okay, all right. I
Most
was a
definitely,
little
yeah.
confused by the comment there. By the way, yes, it looks immaculate from the outside. All right, other questions for the petitioner? All right, you can have a seat.
Okay.
And if we can bring it back to the side, well, normally, just for the record, we've been in the practice of saying if anybody wants to speak from the public on a site plan, even though it's not a public hearing, we let them do it, but there's nobody here except the guy who recused himself. So we're not gonna allow it. So we'll just bring it back to the side table, no public hearing, and discuss a potential motion. Mr. Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a simple, well-put-together plan. I know the business is there for many, many years. I used to work over by it, and I think it's a simple, put-together plan. My question on the lifts had to do, I didn't want to go in the ground. There's a problem with hydraulic leaking into the ground when you go into a post jack. So I wanted to make sure they're surface mount. So with that being said, I'll move the site plan as presented with the contingencies as listed.
Second by Mr. Gattini. So the motion is to approve the site plan as with the list of contingencies, second by Mr. Cantina. Is there any discussion of the motion? Yes.
Well, not of the motion, just have a quick question for Mr. Twing in terms of, it seems like a fairly simple addition request. Help me understand why this had to come before us for a site plan review approval.
It currently exceeds, the addition currently exceeds staff's limit on what we can administratively approve. So the square footage is too big.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? All right, hearing none, I'm going to call the question. I'm going to ask for the vote. I think we can do a voice vote on this. All those in favor of approving, or all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Congratulations. Thank you very much. All right. Next order of business. Got my agenda here. We have some non-action items, then we're going to talk about ordinance issues. So why don't we get the non-action items out of the way, Mr. Twing, if we can.
Those are simply for your information. It's the report from the Oakland County Road Commission and then the administrative site plan approvals that we've done for the time period.
All right. All right, so the next thing that was suggested was by Commissioner Esbree. He wants to talk about some ordinance issues.
I do indeed. Thank you, Mr. Casada. So, as many of you well know, I'm a dork, and in my spare time, I watch meetings I don't need to watch. And in doing so, and watching how the city has evolved, it seems that we have a couple of ordinances that were crafted many, many years ago by a city attorney who may have had a very different mindset for the view and the future of this great city that we live in. I watched a petitioner who had proposed a tattoo parlor, I believe it was on 4th Street or maybe Washington, I can't remember specifically which street it was on, but it was in the heart of the downtown. You know, really get raked over by this former commissioner and be not so much accused, but certainly have his character questioned in ways that I'm not so sure I think is reasonable for somebody who wants to put a stake in our city and then build a business here. But it also led me to believe that, is it time for us to take a look at what we define as an adult use and what do we want our adult use ordinance to look like? What definitions do we want to apply? Do we want to take some of those previous definitions and now make them so that they are administratively approved? So if somebody comes in who wants to have a use today, like we've had microblading come in front of us before. You know, we've had various uses that automatically trigger that ordinance, and maybe it's time to revisit that. So that's the first one I want to talk about, and whoever wants to take it from there, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea. I question, sitting up here and even on the city commission at times, like this poor petitioner, the microblading one gets to me. This person had to dump $500 already trying to start and open up a business so they can, remove hair off somebody's, eyebrows. And it just seemed to me that maybe some of those things might be a little overreaching in a different area. There were perceptions about, crime and things like that. And I think what you're referring to tattoo parlors, that particular individual may have felt that, or wrongly accuses anything that isn't, a Sunday morning bakery of attracting an element. And so I think we also see this too, where just speaking to some of the salon owners, and I think at one time, was it one of the cosmetology schools in town, talked about how, there are no massage services. You see them in chains and all over, like Ferndale, Birmingham, or whatever. And I was like, you know what? That's interesting. I didn't know that was the case. And if you look at, some of the, and I don't know if that's a different ordinance, but there are definitely some of things from that era that seem to be, trying to go back to a time where, everything was, footloose, or so to speak. So I'm open to an idea because, there are some things here that I see in the adult-oriented that we definitely want control over. Like, there's no doubt about it. But there's probably elements here that are way far-reaching. Threading somebody's eyebrows or microneedling someone's eyebrows, I'm not worried about a pandemic of criminal activity because of that.
What would be the process for this? Do you guys send back to the attorney's office and try to clean up some of the language?
Well, I passed out, and I'm sorry I didn't have enough. I thought I printed enough. But I passed out the zoning ordinance section on definitions. That's the first couple of pages that don't have sections on them. Then I included the general business section of the zoning ordinance, that zoning district. That's 77041. That's the only district that adult businesses and entertainment items are allowed as a special land use, and you'll see that listed. And then there are some specific criteria that are referenced that they have to comply with, and that's all of the adult-oriented ones. And I passed out that section, which was 77076. So those are the provisions that apply to any of the uses that fall into that adult-oriented business operation. And whether or not there are some of those that you would simply want to take out of that adult definition would be, I guess, the direction. And what are those ones that you would want to take out? If you turn to the last page, there's pawnbrokers, pawn shops, tattoo, body piercing, and branding parlors, body piercing, branding, tattoo. I guess based on those definitions, which would you want to take out of that treatment? Then would you still want to leave them, or how would you want to address them in the zoning ordinance, meaning which districts would you want to put them in? And would they be permitted uses by right, or would they be special land uses requiring public hearings? So you're going to have to give us a little direction on that before we head down the road of drafting ordinance revisions. In terms of massage establishments, if you wanted to take those out as well, there are separate licensing ordinances and things that we'd probably have to look at as well that really aren't planning commission, they're city commission items. So I think the first step would be to tell us what items you don't believe are any more longer adult-oriented establishments. And once you've determined that, tell us which districts you think they should be permitted in. If you think it's the central business district, okay, are they a permitted use by right, or are they a special land use? And are there any other criteria that they have to fall within? Proximity to schools, other things that you'd want us to look at, so.
So I have a quick question.
Well, go ahead, Ms. Gantino, go ahead, sir.
Sorry. So if we, just as an example, in answer to one of the questions, I'd be comfortable with removing J, K, L, and M from what's considered to be an adult-oriented business. My question is, if we went that route and removed certain items from the list, does that essentially leave them an orphan in terms of that's why that second part or second question comes into play as to we would then need to define where they can exist because we've now taken them off this adult-oriented list?
Right, I would ask you to tell us where they are, because then they really wouldn't be addressed in the ordinance. Tattooing wouldn't be addressed unless it's not a retail establishment. It's different than some personal service establishments like hair salons and beauty shops. Those are specifically listed in certain districts. I think you'd want, if you took them out, to say they're where you want them allowed.
Give it a home, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could just take the definitions and use those. And
Okay, Mr. Esbree.
Yeah, I was going to say, this has been something that's been stewing in my mind for quite some time, but, I called all of you today. I didn't call you, I apologize, I didn't have your number. But I sort of suspected that when we started having this conversation, and I didn't realize that Mr. Twing was going to also equip us with some very valuable information. I'm not so sure that we want to even, do we want to just chew on this for a month and come back next month, with some ideas? So, because nobody wants to do anything half-baked. But I think we, get the ball rolling on this topic, and next month we can come back and come to a consensus. Maybe Mr. Gantina's right on the money. J, K, L, and M, and we've got to find a home for it, and we build consensus in that way, and off we go.
I would add I to that.
Well, but again, that's a discussion we can have after we've, yeah, I see what you're saying, but.
Okay, I have a question for Mr. Twing. I didn't see microblading anywhere in here. Just for my information, which provision are we interpreting to include microblading in one of these? Which one are we including?
well, we've treated it as tattooing. You're basically tattooing someone with art. The ordinance under certain different section talks about the zoning administrator making an interpretation of where it would fit in. What other use is it most similar to? Given that that's what you're doing, is we've treated it in that fashion.
Okay, that answers the question. I just wondered what umbrella did it get swept up into? Because it's not explicit.
Yeah, not every use is listed somewhere,
Yes.
so.
All right, well, I think that I'm just going to respond to Mr. Esby's comment there. Yes, I think that this is not the time and place to come up with a new ordinance proposal. I think that this is raising the question for the first time that we haven't talked about, and I think we should study it. That's my position.
I would also say we can go back and find, because this isn't the first time the topic's come up. We can go back and find the last communications that we had and provide those to you, so you can see where it was left and why it was left in. Some of the discussion probably, and I don't want to guess when it was, but some of the discussion was waiting for the master plan to be done and have a new ordinance written. But I'll get you what was the last time we touched on the adult sections.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. Are there other zoning ordinances that you would like to raise? Mr.
There
Asprey?
are, as a matter of fact, sir. So, and also watching these meetings, I think this board has put the ZBA into a very precarious situation as it pertains to large lot homes in designated large lot zoned areas. As a result, I mean, I remember Mr. Ellis and I were on the Planning Commission all those years ago when we adopted the ordinance that we currently have as a result of the builder who built those homes on Connecticut. You know, and I think that we reacted as we probably should have given the circumstances at that time, but I don't even, Jim, how many years ago was that?
Oh, you still had hair.
Hey, look, you had dark hair.
No, I probably was at least 12, 13.
Well, where the 3,500 square foot came from, if, for those of you, just for background, several years ago, there were what people referred to as Bigfoot homes being built because the prior standard on residential homes was they could cover 30% of a lot. So as long as your footprint was under 30%, you could have a building that was 30 feet tall. And so some of the homes were pretty monolithic in some neighborhoods with some bungalows and some other things. So it was a issue that was raised. The Planning Commission, planning staff actually at the time went through the entire city and took every lot by subdivision and compared it to the lots, the lot size to the house size, and came up with a floor area ratio analysis, did a whole bunch of stuff. And when people figured out that these provisions were going to apply to them, all of a sudden they didn't like it. They just wanted it applied to their neighbor. So at the end of the day, the Planning Commission wanted a simple answer. And the 3,500 square feet is based on a building code requirement that if your house is bigger than that, you have to have an architect design it. So that's where it came from. And it just applies across the city as a totality. Prior to that, as I said, it was based on simply you could cover 30% of your lot with your home and accessory buildings.
Okay, the 30% is still, it's still applicable. It's just that
The total size of the house, yeah.
But you also have the 35, this is just for the record, you also have the 35. So if you had a small lot, you can only cover 30%, even if your house isn't 3,500 square feet. But if you have a huge lot, you have to stop at 3,500, even if it's only 5% of your lot. Okay.
So we discussed this, we had a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the Zoning Board here 6 years ago, 5?
Time flies. It wouldn't surprise me if it was longer ago.
It was pre-COVID.
But yeah, so more than, anyway, and thank you, Mr. Twing, for this map. We looked at this map and we said, look, there are so few sites that are affected by this. And the real hardship for those owners is they'll have to pay the fee to go to the zoning board to get variances, with the thought that the zoning board would grant them those variances. I mean, would logically say, yeah, you've got an enormous lot here, you can put a bigger house here, but A, that has not been the result, and B, the zoning board, and Mr. Esbree will bear me out here, has been applying those standards inconsistently. And so it now appears like we do need to modify the zoning ordinance to accommodate even this small number of sites around the city.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
So I guess I just want to comment on the inception of that 3,500 square foot cap in terms of, understanding where the threshold came from. I don't think it's great basis for having that threshold, especially considering we have lots that already have their own unique designation. That we give them a threshold. If anything over 13,000 square feet is that one family large lot residential. To cap the size of home always seemed sort of arbitrary to me in terms of that 3,500 square foot ceiling being placed on those properties. determining the size of someone's home seems a little bit out of bounds for us as a body. Now, the lot coverage rule, I don't have an issue with that. These larger lots, I think, still need to be burdened by the same rules that any other property in the city would be burdened by. But they are, in fact, larger, and if they do want to build a home that just happens to be a little bit larger, but they're still within the lot coverage, it shouldn't be up to us as a body to sort of say, no, you're only allowed to build this size because of really an arbitrary threshold that was instituted. So that's my opinion.
All right.
Well, and the other issue that frankly concerned me to some degree was, in some of these cases, you have one set of neighbors pitting against another set of neighbors, pitting against a homeowner who just wants to build the dream here in Royal Oak. The next thing you know, you've got both sides lawyering up, and I'm not sure that's the best approach for, trying to develop people or trying to, have properties developed by people who just want to live here in Royal Oak. And the whole notion that this topic has become contentious where it's risen to that level where people are suing one another and lawyering up and so forth. If there's some relief that this table can apply so that people have a more broad use standard, again, like you said, Woody, just out of 3,500 and that's it, you're done. I think we could also be making life easier for a lot of people.
Commissioner Douglas.
Well, and so we are undoubtedly looking at a year or two out, starting to look at, more comprehensive rezoning. This is not something I would want to wait on. And I guess my question would be, can we make it as simple as saying, without affecting the entire, every zoning classification, every residential zoning classification, just say lots over X thousand or X hundred square feet are, limited by 30%, period?
Well, if you look at each of the residential zoning districts, I think it's, if you want to go back to just lot coverage, you can just strike the provision in large lot that says you're capped at 3,500.
Okay, that was my question. Is it that simple?
We'd have to bring the ordinance amendment here, striking that provision. You'd have to hold a hearing on it, and then you'd have to recommend that get adopted by the city commission. The city commission would have to concur and pass it on two readings. It's just like a rezoning. The text amendment is just like a rezoning, pretty much.
Oh, wait, who's first?
Go ahead.
And my thought is, again, just like the previous issue, maybe this one, even more specifically, we should kick back to staff to do, some sort of preliminary analysis, because what we don't know, be careful what you wish for. And we haven't really thought about the pitfalls, and I think we need to give staff a little time to sort of look those things over so that we overall have a better final product.
That's sort of along the lines of what I was going to say is in terms of, gathering some data to get a better understanding of, I think the simplest solution is simply removing the cap on large lot designated properties. It's a very easy solution. At the same time, I don't necessarily know that we wouldn't want to consider this just simply establishing a higher threshold. So we're still allowing, we're still controlling sort of the size of what's allowed, but we're sort of raising that ceiling. And does the data bear that out to say that makes sense to do that? Or does the data show us it makes sense to just strike it all together and not overcomplicate?
Well, just by example, and we can go back and look and see what else we have, but on the first page, in this covered yellow block, if you look at the grade legend up in the corner, it says square feet of a living area according to assessing data. So of all of these properties, 83 of them are under 3,500 square feet, and their average size is 1,450. Only 2 of them exceed 3,500, and their average size is almost 4,200 square feet. So the 3,500 square feet limit impacts very few properties. And if you took it away, would anybody build that big? I don't know, but you may go back and so we did the analysis of how big are the existing homes, and then you look at the lots, and we can dig that back up. But at the end of the day, if you want to set a standard that you can't exceed something, is it going to be just the percentage of the lot, or are you going to cap it somewhere? That's really up to you as a policy recommendation. And then the other thing I would throw out, if you're changing that, you may want to look at what the accessory building size might be too, because I think some people are building bigger garages than 800 square feet when they have this much room. So if you're looking at large lot and you want to treat large lot differently, you may recall too that on Vincetta, I don't know if that was in any of these, but on Vincetta you did an overlay district. I don't see it.
Yeah.
It might not be one of these, it's large lot, so. Anyways, you did the setback issue there, so. No, we can look at this, we can get you the background to it, but at the end of the day, you're gonna have to tell us, policy-wise, whether you want it on a percentage of the lot. These lots are already required to be larger, or whether you want a percentage of the lot capped at a certain amount. But that's going to come from you guys.
Okay, you mentioned, I'm going to pipe up here. So, and Josh should back me up on this. Every rule has a reason. If it doesn't have a reason, it's arbitrary. Can't have that. Mr. Twing mentioned a couple of times public policy. We also talked about it with the balconies there. I would just suggest that when you're looking at this, all the commissioners should think, we need to articulate the policy that we're trying to advance with the rule. That's the only thing I would encourage everybody to do that. There are competing interests that might be in the best interest of the community, and I'm not advocating for any of them, but we for the 3,500 square feet, for instance, you might say, we don't want people to have to use architects in Royal Oak, so we want the 3,500 square feet. You might also say, we want lots of permeable space where we can get it. We don't want people with big lots building on it. There's proportionality issues, there's privacy issues. So what the policy, there should be a policy behind any rule you're making. And if we're going to recommend a public policy to the City Commission, we ought to be able not to just say, here's the rule we want. I'm just encouraging that we should be able to say, here's the policy we want to advance. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, and I think part of it too, I mean, you got a math dynamic here, right? So on a standard lot or whatever, you know, you have setbacks and you have height restrictions and you can only fit so much anyways. And so part of looking at this is to say, okay, well, what could you possibly build? Why is that 3,500 there? What properties is it really affecting? And then from there, take a look and say, is it that we're trying to preserve lot coverage? Because, you know, to counter the argument, let's say you have a street, I'm making up a street like Lexington or Mount Vernon or something like that. You know, could you, you know, what are the setback requirements there? And could you actually have changed the look of the street and the feel of the neighborhood if you allowed folks to unlock, you know, a certain amount of square footage, or could they just build a narrow, you know what I mean? There's so many different dynamics they have within that math problem that, you know, is 3,500, is it arbitrary? Was it targeting a certain neighborhood? Was it, you know, does it really impact? If you were to unlock it, how many cases would that, you know, how many properties would that affect? I don't know if we could really go into that with our data, Mr. Twing. It seems like that 20 years ago, that'd be a horrible exercise, but maybe with some of the data we have, we could understand what those potential impacts could be. And, you know, what are other communities doing? I mean, I think this was an attempt to, like Birmingham was getting a lot of the Bigfoot homes and things like that. We're still seeing those in our neighborhoods. We're still seeing little bungalows with large craftsman, 2,500, 3,000 square foot homes going up right next door. I don't know if they, you know, the lot coverage probably, you know, covers a lot of that dynamic.
Yeah. And some people would say that's a problem, and some people say it's great.
Right.
That's what I say.
What are you trying to achieve? You trying to, you know, keep people in the city of Royal Oak, or, you know,
or bring people in?
Yeah.
I would just say, just to clarify, that's for both the 3,500 lot and the adult change. I'm just saying, anytime we're proposing a change, think about articulating the policy you're trying to advance, whatever it is.
And also look at the policy underlying why the original rule is there in the first place and put the two together.
Which we might not know, so you'll have to help us.
And a lot of them are just their old rules.
And a lot of them are reactive, they just reacted at one point in time, and then we've just lived by it, not going back and saying, well, wait a minute. The same commissions that were trying to ban dancing in the downtown of Royal Oak also wanted to, had an axe to grind versus a developer that was building a house that was 3,600 square feet. I mean, not to say that's the case, but you don't know.
And a lot of discussion previously when the 3,500 was put in place, as I said, there was a lot of similar analysis on lot size and home size. It was to try and maintain the character of the neighborhood. So in order to determine what that you were trying to maintain, what we were trying to establish is what was the character of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Was it 1,400 square foot ranches? Was it bungalows? What was it? And where it kind of went south was when everybody understood that you really couldn't add on or do much to your house once you got to that average.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only so many things you could do with it. So what was the cap? Should there be a cap? And that's the policy I go back to, is if it's 30%, you could build a 1,500 square foot footprint, go up 3 floors and have 4,500 square feet. It's a big house in Royal Oak, so.
I guess I just want to add, in the context of some of the master plan discussion, we talked about multi-generational housing, and we certainly want Royal Oak to be inviting for people in terms of wanting to live here. There certainly could be, as the housing crunch continues to roll on, there may very well be families that have the ability to build a larger home because they intend to house, significantly more of their family in that larger home. And I think sort of making it easier for that to occur in the appropriate areas. So again, this conversation is limited to, in my mind, the large lot designated properties. To make it easier for things like that to happen, I think would be a good thing that we could do if we were to change some rules.
And one other comment, if the intent is to have homes bigger than 3,500 square feet allowed in large lot, I would recommend taking that provision out. It's not good policy to make somebody go to the ZBA and get a variance, because from my standpoint, the attorney's standpoint, I don't want to speak for you, the zoning board really should be turning you down. Yes. It's not good policy to say, we're going to write this, and then they can go there and get a variance, so.
Well, I mean, the exact thing in the exact zoning came up in the last ZBA meeting. The public opposition to it wasn't, I mean, probably 18, 20 people spoke out, but most of the opposition was, well, I was denied this, I was denied that. So it was people that wanted to do something to make their house larger in the past, got denied, so therefore the denial should continue. It's just a very reactionary way of going about it, and it was unique to this particular zoning district.
And I mean, this one, if you want us to move forward, we can get you the background on it, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to decide policy-wise, is there a cap? Is it a percentage of the lot? Is it the percentage of the lot plus a cap? That's going to come to you guys. So.
Well, and is there anything preventing them from just building 3,500 feet straight up? Could you not just make it four stories of 3,500 square feet?
No, understand the lot coverage provision was, there was no cap on square footage. So what was occurring was somebody was covering 30% and going up 3 floors. And so the house was 3 levels of
There's still a height
a
restriction.
ranch.
There was a height restriction.
Well, 30 feet.
That's a lot of house.
It's a big house. So,
All right.
anyways.
Any other comments on this? What's our plan of action here? It sounds to me like the department is willing to look at the 3,500 square foot rule, and the rest of the commissioners are going to think about that and the information we got, including the adult commercial enterprise issue.
Yeah, what I heard was you're going to look at the adult things and then let us know at a future meeting where you want to head. The large lot, it sounds like you want to move forward with something. So we'll start putting more of the background together for it, but you'll have to think about how you want it addressed in terms of how big or whether there is a limit. And we'll try to get that. As I was mentioning at the break, I think your December and January meetings might be jammed, so we'll bring it if it makes sense at a meeting.
Do you have another comment?
No,
Okay.
let's give it a thumbs up.
Oh, okay. All right, is there anything else, even though there's no audience here, there might be a television audience, so is there anything any of the commissioners would like to state, comment, address here at the end of the meeting? Mr. Esprey?
Can we ask our newest member to make the Mr. motion?
We can do that. At some point, somebody has to move to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gantina. All those, the motion is to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Not hearing none. Good job, Brian. We are adjourned. Thank you very much and welcome.
Officially are on the stats list now.